2024 spring semester. With the global population projected to reach 9.7 billion by 2050, we are facing the increasingly complex challenge of how to feed the world amidst climate change, resource scarcity, and political conflict. During the next hour, we will delve into the crucial work being done at UW-Madison to ensure access to safe, nutritious, sustainable, and abundant food for our expanding global population. Throughout this academic year, we have heard from CALS faculty and staff whose work contributes to solving some of these issues. We have explored innovative strategies, best practices, and the latest research that can help us not only meet the world's food demands, but also do so in an environmentally responsible and ethically just manner. My name is Jennifer Kushner, and I am the director of CALS Global and your host for today. CALS Global facilitates and supports international engagement for faculty, staff, postdocs, and grad students, as well as cultivates international partnerships and hosts visitors. For today's session, I will introduce each speaker prior to their talk, and if time allows, we will answer some questions from the audience at the end of the hour. Please feel free to put questions in the chat as you think of them, and we'll return to them if there's time at the end. We have asked our speakers to touch on the following questions for today. Number one, from your area or areas of expertise, what innovations hold the most promise for contributing to a world that is safely and sufficiently fed? Number two, where does your field need to grow to address gaps in how it understands and approaches feeding the world? Number three, what is the most important thing you've learned through your work so far as it pertains to feeding the world? And what advice do you have for someone getting started in your discipline who wants to address food systems and security on a global scale? Without further ado, allow me to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Sarah Adcock. Dr. Sarah Adcock is an assistant professor in the Department of Animal and Dairy Sciences at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her research focuses on how to advance sustainable food systems that safeguard animal welfare alongside economic and environmental considerations. Much of her work focuses on quantifying and mitigating the welfare impacts of routine painful procedures in farm animals, including sheep, laying hens, and dairy cattle. Without further ado, Sarah, I'm handing it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen now. All right, is that showing up okay?
Yes.
Great. All right, well, thank you for having me as part of the Global Conversation series. So my plan for today's talk is to give a brief overview of where things are currently standing with painful procedures in farm animals, and to highlight some work that we've been doing in this area. So when we talk about feeding the world, we need to balance the three pillars of sustainability. So ensuring that livestock production is economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable. And often when we talk about sustainability, we focus on economic and environmental considerations, and the social component tends to receive less attention. So one of the elements of social sustainability is making sure that we are listening to the citizen's voice. So how does society view animal agriculture? So practices that society considers unacceptable cannot be sustainable in the long run. And a key area of public concern is animal welfare. So how we've been raising animals is increasingly scrutinized by our society. And one of these key welfare concerns is the performance of painful procedures in farm animals. So although the public generally has a significant gap in knowledge about painful procedures that are performed on farms, when they are made aware of them, the acceptance for these procedures is very low. And when they're performed in the absence of pain relief, they are deemed to be entirely unacceptable. And campaigns from advocacy organizations also often focus their efforts on painful procedures like dehorning in dairy cattle and tail docking in pigs. And these procedures have been subject to increasing regulation, albeit mostly in Europe and a lot less so in North America. So painful procedures are routinely performed in animal agriculture, often when animals are at a young age. So in the dairy industry, Disbudding is a common practice. So this is the prevention of horn growth before the horns have erupted from the skull. And dehorning is a procedure that's performed after the horn has erupted, so when the calf is older. And it's much less common to see dehorning on dairy farms. Disbudding is much more typical. And then ear tagging is a routine method of identification in calves. Beef cattle are commonly branded as well as disbudded or dehorned, depending on the age of the calf, as well as castrated. And these procedures tend to happen at the same time. In the egg industry, it's common to beak trim chicks at 1 day of age. So this is a procedure that's done to reduce the risk of feather pecking and cannibalism, which are common in the egg industry. And in pigs, tail docking, castration, ear notching, which is a form of identification where parts of the ear are removed, as well as teeth clipping, which is done to reduce damage to the sow's teats, are commonly done when the piglets are less than a week of age. And in the sheep industry, tail docking, castration, and ear tagging are all routine procedures. So painful procedures are not regulated in the US, but there are a couple exceptions. So tail docking in dairy cattle was banned in California in 2009, and that was followed by state bans in Rhode Island and Ohio. And in 2017, the dairy industry banned tail docking in their farm animal care program, which essentially resulted in a countrywide ban on the procedure of tail docking. So tail docking in dairy cattle is not routinely performed in the US anymore. There are also some voluntary programs that prohibit certain procedures. So these are third-party labeling programs that producers can choose to participate in if they meet the program's animal care standards. So Global Animal Partnership prohibits routine painful procedures in the higher tiers of their labeling program. Animal Welfare Approved prohibits most types of painful procedures. And then Certified Humane makes more allowances. So they allow procedures like beak trimming in chicks, but they prohibit some, so like ear notching and as an identification method in pigs. And almost all of these procedures are performed in the absence of pain relief, with just a couple exceptions. So in the last few years, the dairy industry has updated their animal care program to now require that pain relief be used for disbudding. And they also require that this procedure occurs before 8 weeks of age, which effectively prohibits dehorning, which occurs after 2 months of age when the horn has already erupted from the skull. And then there are also many voluntary programs that do require pain relief for some of these procedures, but these voluntary programs only cover a minority of farms in the US. So research on pain relief is still lacking for a lot of these procedures, but by far the one that we have the most research on is disbudding. So there's plenty of evidence that shows that providing a local anesthetic immediately before the procedure is effective at reducing acute pain. So this is a video I'm going to show of a calf being disbudded using the hot iron method. So this is an iron that is heated up to about 600 degrees Fahrenheit, so very hot, and is applied to the horn bud for about 10 to 15 seconds. This creates a third-degree burn that kills the horn growing cells and prevents the horn from growing. So this calf has received an injection of local anesthetics. So you'll see that when the iron is applied, there's no behavioral response from her. And this would be very different if anesthetic was not applied. So you would see quite a lot of struggling when the iron is applied. So this local anesthetic is an effective strategy for managing acute pain during the procedure. And you can see here also she's being restrained in a head device, but there's still room for her to respond if she was experiencing some kind of sensation. So although this essentially blocks acute pain during the procedure, we know that for disbudding, as well as for many of these other procedures, the pain outlasts the duration of analgesics. So even when local anesthetics are supplemented with other medications like nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, that will only extend the pain relief to several hours or a day or two after the procedure at most. And we know that pain from many of these procedures lasts for several days, if not weeks afterwards. So at the moment, we don't have a practical solution for alleviating pain of that duration. So we're limited by the drugs that are available, as well as the practicality of administering drugs over an extended period of time. So I'm going to review some of the research demonstrating how long the pain can last after some of these procedures. So starting with disbudding, we have found that hot iron disbudding wounds take about 9 weeks to heal on average. So immediately after disbudding, we'll see this copper ring of necrotic tissue, which begins to detach from the scalp about 2 weeks after disbudding. By week 3, the scab has fallen off, leaving this open wound that over the course of the next few weeks will scab over and contract. And by about 9 weeks afterwards, we'll see a new layer of epithelium present over the wound bed. An alternative to disbudding with hot iron is to use a caustic paste method. So caustic paste can be applied to the hornbud to create a third-degree chemical burn. And this method is increasing in popularity because it is easier to apply than a hot iron. And there's also a common perception that it is less painful and more acceptable to the public because the pain response is not as immediate as when a hot iron is used. However, we know that the research has shown that caustic paste is still acutely painful for the calf. And in addition, the wounds take almost twice as long to heal as they do for hot iron wounds. So 16 weeks on average compared to 9 weeks. So what does the calf experience during this healing period? So to test whether the wounds are painful during this time, we can use a method called pressure algometry. So this is a video of a pressure algometer that is used to apply increasing pressure around the wound until the calf withdraws from that force. So the idea is that the more sensitive the wound is, the lower the amount of force is needed to elicit that withdrawal response. And we have consistently found that disbudding wounds are painful throughout the healing period. So calves will respond to lower forces when it's applied to healing wounds than when the wound has finished healing, or compared to control animals that were not disbudded. And we've replicated this result across calves that have been disbudded at different ages, as well as in goat kids. So goats are also commonly disbudded in the dairy goat industry. So these results indicate that the wounds are painful for several weeks. We've also been looking at the wound healing process after tail docking in lambs. So my PhD student, Jocelyn Woods, recorded how long it takes wounds to heal after tail docking. So tails are typically removed in the sheep industry with the idea that it will keep the animals cleaner and reduce the risk of fly strike, which is where flies will lay eggs in the animal's skin. And it's a very painful and sometimes deadly condition. Although the actual evidence for tail docking reducing the effect of fly strike is actually pretty mixed and inconclusive. So a common method for tail docking is to apply a constrictive rubber ring that will eventually cause the distal part of the tail to atrophy. And over the course of about 3 weeks, that tail, the blood supply will be constricted, and the tail will eventually fall off around 20 days. And then it will take another few weeks for the remaining stump to heal. So the entire healing process takes on average 6 weeks. We've also observed signs of infection in about 96% of the lambs. So another potential welfare concern here to consider. And we're currently looking at indicators of pain that potentially were experienced during that healing process. Another procedure that creates long-lasting sensitivity is beak trimming, which is a common practice in the egg industry. So chicks' beaks are commonly trimmed at 1 day of age at the hatchery. And this is done to curb the occurrence of feather pecking, vent pecking, and cannibalism, which is very costly for the industry and very damaging to the hen's welfare. So my postdoc, Haipeng Shi, conducted a trial to see how long beaks were sensitive for after beak trimming. So we had 16 pens, and in half of those pens, we had birds that were beak trimmed at the hatchery, and in the other half, we had birds that had their beaks left intact. And we used a pressure transducer to assess pecking force for a 5-minute period each week from 3 to 6 weeks of age. So in this video, you'll see that the birds are pecking at a sensor on the stick here coming down along the fence. And the amount of force that's being applied to that sensor is registered and recorded on a computer. So there's a little red dot there that the chickens will peck at, and then the force is read through onto a computer, so you can see the amount of force that's actually being applied by the pecking. Okay, so we found that the beak-trimmed birds had a weaker pecking force on average than untrimmed birds did for up to 6 weeks of age. So this figure is actually showing 4 different treatment groups because we were also interested in seeing whether a high fiber diet could serve as an alternative to beak trimming by reducing the occurrence of feather pecking later in life. But what we see here is that for both beak trim treatments, so regardless of diet, they had a weaker pecking force than the beak intact birds through 6 weeks of age, which suggests that the birds were experiencing pain during that period. And there is also potential for pain to become chronic. So many of these procedures involve amputating body parts like tails, beaks, or testicles. And we know in people who have undergone amputations that 80% of them will experience chronic pain through the development of neuromas. So after an amputation, the severed nerves will try to regenerate axons to the original target body part, which no longer exists. So instead, these nerve endings will form a tangled mass that can send these confusing signals to the brain and lead to the sensation of pain. So neuromas have been observed after tail docking in lambs, piglets, and calves, as well as beak trimming in chickens and castration in horses. So all evidence to suggest that these procedures may cause chronic pain. And in addition to concerns about long-lasting pain from these procedures, the physical alterations of body parts have implications for the animal's functioning, since these body parts also serve important adaptive functions. So for example, horns are thought to play a role in thermal regulation as well as social behaviors. Beaks in chickens are important for feeding and preening behaviors. Tails are important for fly avoidance as well as social communication across a lot of different species. And there hasn't actually been a lot of research into this area. So we don't know, this is just theoretical possibility that the amputation of these body parts may have implications beyond pain. So we are currently looking into this with tail docking in lambs. So my PhD student, Jocelyn Woods, is looking at how docking affects mating behaviors. So she found that undocked ewes were more likely to receive headbutts from a ram than docked ewes were. And these headbutts may potentially indicate sexual interest by the ram. So it's possible that the rams are actually more attracted to ewes that have their tails intact than ewes without their tails. We also found that the undocked ewes accepted more mounts from the ram than docked ewes did. So even though the ram mounted docked and undocked ewes at the same rate, the undocked ewes were more than twice as likely to accept those mounts than undocked ewes. And we don't know what the mechanism is behind this difference. So it could be that the tails are helping to indicate the ewe's sexual receptivity, but pain could also play a role here as well. So it's possible that if there are neuromas in the tail stump, then being mounted by the ram could be a potentially painful experience for the ewe. So we still have a lot more research to do in this area to see how the lack of a tail may affect different aspects of the animal's behavior. So overall, the more that we learn about the effects of painful procedures, the clearer it becomes that these are just not sustainable practices. So the injuries from these procedures are severe. They take several weeks to heal, and they are often accompanied by long-lasting pain. And often the solutions that are proposed involve providing pain relief during the procedure, which is definitely a step in the right direction. However, those available drugs that we have are not sufficient to cover the duration of pain that is experienced by the animal. And beyond concerns about pain, These body parts have evolved to serve important adaptive function, so it's possible that physically altering them can alter the animal's behavior in potentially unforeseen and undesirable ways. So it's important that we focus on finding alternatives to these procedures. And these alternatives can be broadly categorized into two approaches. So one approach is to alter the animal to match the environment by altering their genetics. So, for example, we can selectively breed for hornless cattle since horns are under genetic control. So many beef breeds, for example, are actually already hornless and don't need to be disbudded. So there are efforts underway to introduce these hornless genetics to dairy breeds as well, which would reduce the need for disbudding. And then in addition, we know that feather pecking is to some degree under genetic control. So some strains are less likely to develop feather pecking outbreaks. So we can focus on developing those strains to reduce the need for beak trimming. And then another approach is to alter the environment to match the needs of the animal. So many of these procedures are done to reduce welfare issues that are caused by intensive housing. So, for example, tail docking in pigs is done to reduce tail biting. And there are many risk factors that go into tail biting, but it can be reduced by giving animals more space. So, reducing stocking densities, as well as providing enrichments in their environment to occupy the pigs and provide more opportunities for foraging behaviors. So I'd just like to acknowledge everyone who contributed to the research I talked about today. So the tail docking research was done by my PhD student, Jocelyn Woods, and the beak trimming research has been done by my postdoc, Haipeng Shi. The disbudding research was done in collaboration with Alicia Dranke, who's a PhD student at UC Davis, and her advisor and my former PhD advisor, Cassandra Tucker. And then I'd also like to acknowledge the animal facility managers at UW. So the sheep unit manager, Todd Taylor, and the poultry unit manager, Dawn Irish, who have supported this research, as well as our funders, USDA, NIFA, and Open Philanthropy. And then I just want to take a few minutes to address the questions that were provided. So the first question was, what innovations hold the most promise for contributing to a world that is safely and sufficiently fed? So I think that solutions proposed for animal welfare have to be scientifically validated. So we need to show evidence that they are in fact benefiting the animal and don't just look good on paper. So for example, making sure pain medications have been tested rigorously and do provide benefits. We also need to make sure that those solutions are socially acceptable. So for example, chemical castration has been suggested as a more welfare-friendly alternative to surgical castration, but surveys have shown that the public have some concern about using these methods. And then, of course, making sure that it's economically viable. So is it practical for farmers to implement on farm? What does your field need to grow to address gaps in how it understands and approaches feeding the world? So I think for welfare solutions to be sustainable, we really need to focus on interdisciplinary approaches that consider the needs of the animal, but also recognize the need for these livestock systems to contribute to food security. So this interdisciplinary research is already happening, but the more that we can invest in interdisciplinary collaborations to understand how animal welfare fits into economic and environmental goals, the more effective our progress will be in this area. And then also making sure that we are engaging stakeholders in the decision-making process to ensure research actually translates into real-world improvements for animal welfare. So what's the most important thing you've learned through your work so far as it pertains to feeding the world? I think it's been really eye-opening to see how many of our recommendations for animal husbandry practices rely on some unproven assumptions. So for example, assumptions about how long pain lasts, or that neonates experience less pain, which we now know is untrue. But that was commonly stated as an accepted truth for many decades. So I think over time, these assumptions can become repeated, and it's important that we identify them and question them and make sure that we are testing them to make sure we are actually doing things that benefit the animals. And then the last one What advice do you have for someone getting started in your field who wants to address food systems and security on a global scale? So I think a lot of people get into the field of animal welfare because they're motivated by compassion for the animals. And I think it's important to maintain this compassion while also extending it to the people who are involved in these decisions as well. So making sure that we are meeting people where they are and listening to the needs of different stakeholders to develop that common ground and find solutions that work for everybody. And also cultivating resilience, because progress can sometimes be slow, but it's important that we maintain the momentum and perseverance. So with that, I'll end here, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was very, very interesting. I hope we have some time for questions. I'm going to move on to our next speaker, and like I said, we'll come back at the end. So our next guest is Dr. Zhou Zhang. Dr. Zhou Zhang received her BS degree in astronautics engineering and MS degree in instrumentation science and optoelectronics engineering from Beiyang University in Beijing, China, in 2010 and 2013, respectively. She received her PhD degree in geomatics and civil engineering from Purdue University in 2017. She previously worked as a postdoc scholar at the University of California, Davis on almond yield prediction using satellite remote sensing and machine learning. She is currently an associate professor in biological systems engineering. Her research interests include satellite remote sensing, drone-based imaging platform developments for precision agriculture, multi-source remote sensing data fusion, artificial intelligence, and machine learning in agricultural applications. Zhou, I turn it over to you and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction. Now I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see it well? Okay.
Yes, it looks great. Yep.
Okay, so thank you for having this opportunity to present our lab's work. Our lab is the Digital Agriculture Research Lab in Biological System Engineering. So our research mainly focuses on using the AI technologies to help the sustainable agriculture. So as we all know that right now we are facing a food insecurity issue due to the continued growing global population. So you may heard about this, that by 2050, we may reach 10 billion people. In order to feed this large amount of people, we need to produce more food in a more efficient way. So in the past decade, we have seen that farmers, producers started using these sensors like drones, GPS, for data collection to replace the traditional, hands-on survey. Although we started using these advanced sensors to help data collection, but we just collect a bunch of data. We haven't really done much about extracting the useful information out of this abundant data. So we have lots of data, but we don't really know how to make informative decisions with this data. So nowadays, with the advancement of AI technologies, we have more and more advanced machine learning models have been developed. So there are also quite a lot of opportunities in agriculture where we can combine the data we collected using the precision ag tools with AI machine learning models, and then so that we can close the loop to provide informative decisions. So agriculture is really challenged in terms of big data. Why I said that? Because in agriculture, we usually collect data from different models, from different sources. For example, you probably will go to the field to collect some data just by hands. Also, we collect some that data from nearby weather station, or we can use harvester, planter, or robotics to collect data or even recently we're using drone images or we're using satellite images, all this data from different platforms and they look different, they have different formats. So how can we really combine all this data so we can take full advantage of this multi-source data is really the focus of our lab's research. So AI actually is relatively a broad idea. I want to delve down into two concrete examples where our lab currently is working on. So you probably have an idea of how we can using this big data machine learning to help with sustainable agriculture. So I want to give two examples. The first example is a USDA NIFA funded project. This is a project we are currently collaborating with USDA NAS. NAS is the National Statistical Arm of USDA. So as you can see here in this figure, this is a corn yield for 2019 by county. So you can gather this data just from USDA NAS website. So greener means like higher county level yield, darker green, lighter green is lower county level yield. So as you see here, this is because for corn, so mostly like in the Midwest region. And this data actually is published by USDA NAS February after the production year. So February of harvest the next year. But they don't really have any in-season county level yield data. What does it mean? Because we already plant corn in May and harvest in October, but we don't really have any yield prediction between this growing season. We can only gather it after February next year. But also even this very recently, due to the budget constraint, NAS just decided not to publish this data anymore starting from 2024. So this county level yield statistic data after 2024 will not be available to the public, but there is a strong need from both the business or governments for this kind of data. So we talked with NAS people, so we developed this project, and then we decided to develop models to really generate this county level crop yield, and then as well as develop visualization tool for people to use for free use. So this county level yield prediction is important because it currently really support many decisions made by business, the governance, and also it's important for understanding the conditions in the commodity markets. Also, because we are really now doing like field level, small area, we are doing for the continuous US large-scale crop yield prediction is really critical for like food security and economic stability. What's the reason of doing this? Why is that the NAS is no longer to provide such data? The other is even they did have this before, they were relying on some large-scale field surveys, which we know is labor-intensive and time-consuming. Also, they don't really have the county-level in-season data. They have some state-level in-season data, but that's like more like a poor spatial resolutions. So the data could not really meet the needs for in-season this county-level yield prediction. So we know that we can use some remote sensing images to help monitor the crop growth. So we decided to use this public free model satellite data. We gather this data using this public cloud, Google Earth Engine. All the data are publicly free. We also collect some climate, soil, topographic data. All our data sources are public free. So we combine these different data sources, and then we develop a Bayesian neural network deep learning model, which can not only help us predict the yield, where you see this yield net, but also it can provide uncertainty, because we want to know how much uncertainty we have for our prediction. So yeah, this is the model architecture. if you are interested, you can check this published paper where gives you more details about how the model it works out. Basically, we import all the different data as input, and we have this feature extraction net to extract some useful information out of the multi-source data, as I said earlier, like not only satellite, but also climate, soil. And then we output not only the yield, but also the uncertainty associated with the yield prediction. We generated some yield prediction maps, and we compare this with the NAS ground truth data, and we got this prediction arrow maps. So this is because our goal is to provide the in-season, not the after-season prediction. So we did bi-weekly in-season prediction, where we started just from the corn is just planted until the harvest time, started from mid-May until early October. And we can see that as time persists, starting from early August, the arrows are kind of stabilized and they are much smaller than the early season prediction, which means as time goes, plants grow, we can gather more useful signal from the satellite images. We can capture that signals, so we can generate a better prediction model. So we can see that by this early August, the arrow does not really have a big difference with the arrow map we got by the end of the season, which means we can generate this in-season prediction at least 2 months earlier before the harvest. So the producers, stakeholders can know the yield predictions even before the harvest until at least 2 months earlier. Also, as our model can output not only the predicted yield, but also the uncertainty. So we can use this uncertainty to evaluate our model as well. As you see at the beginning of the season, the uncertainty is large, but as time persists, again, the uncertainty goes down, the same as the same spatial, similar patterns as the arrow maps. So you can also find out that some states has like larger uncertainty or larger arrows than some other states. For example, across the 12 states in the Midwest, Iowa state, it has much better prediction performance, lower uncertainty, lower arrow probably than North Dakota, South Dakota. One major reason is that Iowa just has more corn production than some other states, which means in the Iowa area, we have more ground truth data for us to really train the model. Because our goal is really to like have people use our tool, so we develop this web interface. So here is the URL. It's still under development, where you can really select your location, different county, because it's a county level. I just use the Dane County as example. You can select crop type. We have corn, soybean. You can select prediction year, and we are doing bi-weekly, so you can just select the date every 2 weeks. And then once you apply those, you can see some results. Also, we are going to provide a download tool, so you can really download the data into like Excel sheet format for your use. So that's the first project I want to talk about. That project, we focus on this large-scale crop yield prediction. Our goal is to use these AI tools to help forecast the yield earlier than the harvesting season, so we can still do management, market management or crop management. So that's from the management perspective. To really feed the world, we can also produce more food just by the seeding perspective, where we can generate just a better variety. For example, we can do crop breeding to generate better variety, where itself genetically can just produce the higher yield, right? So for this project, we work on like a collaboration, work on this with crop breeders, work on this high throughput plant phenotyping. We focus on we will focus on the forage crop, because compared to the corn, soybean, these grain crops, forage crop has received relatively less attention, but it's still like a significant crop, especially in Wisconsin. So this project is we want to, the breeding criteria for this corn silage is the expected milk yield, which is really a combination of the forage quality and yield data. So yeah, this traditional silage phenotyping, like we need to go to the field and we need to measure the quality and the yield. How can we do that? We go to the field, take a bag, collect the samples and come back, grind the samples into small particles and put them into this kind of machine and run the machine and then get the results. Also, we need to dry it. So the whole process can take a few days and each sample processing fee is really costly. So you can imagine you have thousands of samples you need to collect even for one breeding field, then that's really a high cost. So to really help expedite the process, oh yeah, before that, I want to mention the important forage quality traits we need to measure in case someone not quite familiar with this. So like the dry matter yield, crude protein, some fibers, ADF, NDF, starch, all these are forage qualities. So we combine them and into a milk 2006 equation to get the breeding, final breeding criteria where we need just to combine all these forage quality traits. So we try to come up a way to really help do the phenotyping in a high throughput manner. So we thought about using the drone imagery to help collect data and develop models to help estimate those quality traits. So this is the drone imaging system we used. It's a multi-sensor imaging system. It consists of like a hyperspectral imager is in the middle here, just a traditional RGB camera and also a LiDAR. So it can provide both the spectral color information as well as the LiDAR point clouds, which give you the structure information of the plants. So because we collect not only a single data, right? Because we need to monitor from May until October, the entire growing season, we need to collect data in time series. Say probably we collect one drone images, we fly one time at least per week. So we have all this time series data. So this is pretty similar to our language, right? Which is a sequence data. So right now there's a very popular like ChatGPT model, transformation model, where they just use this language sequence data. So we just inspired by that model, we also design a similar model where we can combine this time series sequence data to take effective use of the drone images. So here is our developed model. We have this time series drone image data sets, not a single data set, it's a time series data. And then we have the transformer block, which is the backbone of the ChatGPT model. And then we estimate multiple these quality traits. So we develop our model into a multitask setting where we can predict not only a single trait, but multiple traits together in one model. In this way, we have only one model, so we can output all these quality traits. Also, it can help investigate the underlying relationship among different quality traits instead of treating them independently. So that's the two examples I want to show. Our lab also focuses on other applications using AI in agriculture. For example, when we do crop breeding, we are also concerned about the corn stand counting. In this way, we can also fly a small drone, just a traditional cheap RGB camera, and then we use some computer vision models to detect the crop emergence rate. Also, we can do weed detection. This can be combined with the drone sprayer, right? Because the FAA just allowed to have the swarm drones. So you can have multiple drones fly together, where you have one drone just probably using the camera to detect the weed, generate the weed maps, and then have another sprayer drone just to spray the areas where you have these, right? Also, we work on like alfalfa yield prediction and quality prediction. So yeah, this is another type of forage crop. We can do like this field level yield and quality prediction to help estimate the optimum window for alfalfa harvesting. So yeah, that's the end for my presentation, and I welcome any questions from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really interesting. We do have a few minutes for questions. If you have any, you can feel free to unmute your microphone and just ask them out loud for either of our guests, or you can put them in the chat and we can read those out loud. And you also can follow up directly with our speakers. We'll provide the contact information. So let me just take a pause here and see. I'm going to take a look in the chat. Like I said, feel free to just unmute your microphone as well if you've got a question. Not seeing anything in the chat box at this point. Well, maybe while we're waiting, Zhou, I'm curious about the questions that we posed to the two of you, and in particular, I wanted to just start with that last question. What advice would you have for somebody who's wanting to get started in your field?
Okay, so I especially for maybe the new graduate students who wants to start, I want you to make sure you really want to learn the skill sets needed in AI, because this is a highly interdisciplinary area. You need to know some agriculture knowledge, but also you will need to really enhance your skill sets in computer science, programming, all these other disciplines. And you will be love to work in a collaborative and interdisciplinary team, because on your team, you will have people from really different backgrounds. You need to understand agricultural research problem, but should also be able to use the technical computer science skill sets to really solve the problem.
Thank you. I'll follow up on that as long as if we don't have any other direct questions, since both of you have mentioned interdisciplinarity, and that's a topic that comes up fairly frequently. I'm curious what have been the best ways or experiences for you to develop your own skills at working interdisciplinarily? Either of you or both of you.
Maybe I can start first.
Sure.
I think based on my background, I somehow come to this way naturally, because I have really interdisciplinary educational background. That's not really my purpose, but somehow it became that way. So yeah, I studied really different majors across bachelor, master, and or even PhD degrees. But I started to enhance quite a bit about this computer science, machine learning skill sets during my PhD, where I started processing the remote sensing images. And during my PhD, we had some agricultural projects that I feel like quite interesting. So and where I decided to land my career with. So I to enhance the agriculture background, I feel like I didn't really have a solid agriculture degree. I decided to went to one of the best agriculture college, UC Davis, to do a postdoc to enhance this background. So that's how I landed here.
Interesting. Sarah, what about you?
Yeah, so I think that UW makes it very easy to foster collaborations. It's just such a collaborative environment, and everyone is so willing to collaborate and help each other out. So I think that part has been really, it's been really amazing to have here, and um, has made it much easier to approach people about collaborations, just with that very welcoming environment to be in. And I think a lot of the questions that I'm interested in really do require an interdisciplinary approach, where I'm just outside the boundaries of my own knowledge and having the expertise here at UW and elsewhere too. It's really nice to be able to use that and work together with people who have very different areas of expertise and skills to contribute.
Thank you. All right. We'll give it another minute or two and see if we have any last minute questions. And of course, you've got our contact information, so feel free to reach out to the guests directly. I'm not seeing anything. Before we part ways, I would like to thank everybody for participating in the session today. This is the last installment of Global Conversations for the spring semester. So the series will return at the start of the fall semester, and please stay tuned over the summer for any additional information, probably later in the summer. Thank you to our guests. Thank you all for participating. Take good care.
Thanks for having us. Bye.